At the stroke of midnight on June 19, 2014, while most of Spain slept, a single line was published in the country's official state gazette, and the moment it appeared, an 8-year-old girl's entire future changed forever. No fireworks. No announcement blasted across every television screen in real time. Just a legal document, quietly entering into force, that instantly made Leonor de Borbón the heir to the Spanish throne. She woke up the next morning as Princess of Asturias, first in line to become Queen of Spain, and by the time she went to bed that night, her life would never again belong entirely to her. This is the story of the night everything changed for Princess Leonor, and the surprisingly quiet, almost unremarkable way it actually happened. To understand why that midnight moment carried so much weight, you have to rewind 17 days, to June 2, 2014, when Spain's Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy appeared on national television with news nobody had been expecting. King Juan Carlos, who had led Spain through its transition from dictatorship to democracy across nearly 4 decades on the throne, was going to abdicate. The king's own popularity had been steadily eroding for years, worn down by a lavish elephant hunting trip in Botswana that surfaced publicly in 2012 while Spain was in the grip of a brutal financial crisis, along with a corruption investigation surrounding his daughter and son-in-law. In his televised address, the 76-year-old king spoke of a new generation needing to step forward, younger people with new energy, as he prepared to hand the crown to his son, Crown Prince Felipe. For the next 17 days, Spain existed in a strange kind of limbo, a country that knew a change of monarch was coming but hadn't yet experienced it. Spanish law required an organic law permitting the abdication, one that needed drafting by the government and formal approval by the Cortes Generales, Spain's parliament. That process moved quickly by legislative standards, but it still meant more than 2 weeks passed between the announcement and the moment it actually became real. Then came June 18. In a ceremony inside the Hall of Columns at the Royal Palace of Madrid, King Juan Carlos signed the instrument of abdication, the formal legal document ending his reign. But here's the detail most coverage of that day glosses over. The signature itself didn't immediately transfer the crown. The abdication only became legally effective once it was published in Spain's official state gazette, and that publication happened at midnight, as June 18 quietly became June 19. In other words, the exact instant Leonor became heir to the Spanish throne wasn't a ceremony, wasn't a speech, wasn't a moment captured by television cameras at all. It was a legal technicality, occurring in the middle of the night, while an 8-year-old girl was almost certainly asleep, with absolutely no idea that her entire future had just been permanently rewritten in a government document she wouldn't fully understand for years. Now here's what makes that quiet, almost anticlimactic midnight moment so different from what came next, and why understanding the gap between the two tells you something important about how modern monarchies actually function. I'll walk you through exactly what happened the following morning, and why the contrast between a document published at midnight and a ceremony broadcast to millions says something surprisingly honest about the nature of institutional power. But first, if you're the kind of person who wants the full story behind a headline instead of just the headline itself, subscribing helps this channel keep digging into these moments properly, and it takes about 2 seconds before you keep watching. The morning of June 19 looked nothing like the quiet legal transfer that had technically already occurred hours earlier. Felipe was formally proclaimed monarch in a ceremony inside Spain's parliament, a deliberately low-key occasion by royal standards, without the pomp of foreign dignitaries or an elaborate coronation, reflecting both austere economic times and a royal reputation still recovering from years of scandal. Spain's prime minister described the succession as sending an exemplary message, positioning the new king as a figure of hope, harmony, and equality for the country. After a brief military parade, Felipe and Letizia rode through the streets of Madrid in an open-top vintage Rolls-Royce, before the family appeared together on the balcony of the royal palace to greet the crowds gathered below. And there, on that balcony, stood Leonor, 8 years old, alongside her 7-year-old sister Sofia, both of them present for a moment neither could have possibly grasped the full weight of. Crowds chanted "Long live the king." Her father wore the presidential sash of Spain's commander-in-chief, formally handed to him by Juan Carlos in a separate ceremony that same morning. Leonor's own life had just been irreversibly redirected by that quiet midnight document, And yet here she was, simply standing on a balcony in a formal dress, waving to a crowd, doing what 8-year-old girls at royal events are expected to do, with no visible indication that anything unusual had happened to her personally at all. That contrast, a life-altering constitutional shift occurring invisibly overnight, followed by a very public, very photographed morning where the child at the center of it all simply smiled and waved, is worth sitting with. Because it captures something true about what actually changes when a monarchy transfers power. It isn't a single dramatic moment a child experiences and understands in real time. It's a structural shift, invisible and legalistic, that then gets wrapped afterward in ceremony and spectacle for public consumption, while the person it actually happened to is left to grow into the reality of it over years, not hours. And grow into it, she did, gradually and very publicly. For the next 9 years, Leonor existed in a strange in-between status, a princess by title, but not yet legally recognized in the full sense the Spanish Constitution requires. That recognition wouldn't come until October 31, 2023, her 18th birthday, when she swore a formal oath of allegiance to the Spanish Constitution inside the Congress of Deputies, the same ceremony her father had completed on his own 18th birthday in 1986, and his father before him. Fittingly, Republican government ministers and Catalan and Basque nationalist lawmakers boycotted that 2023 ceremony, a reminder that even nearly a decade after that quiet midnight in 2014, the legitimacy of the institution Leonor now represented was still being actively contested by parts of Spanish political life. Her own grandfather, Juan Carlos, who had by then left Spain for Abu Dhabi in 2020 amid a fresh wave of financial scandal allegations, wasn't present in Parliament either, though he did attend a private family celebration later that day. In her remarks following the oath, Leonor described the day as one she would always remember with great emotion, asking the country to place its trust in her the way she had placed her trust in Spain's future. It's a striking thing to hear from someone still technically a teenager, formally asking an entire nation for confidence in her, 9 years almost to the month after a legal document published at midnight had quietly made that request inevitable. There's a wider pattern worth naming here, one that applies not just to Leonor but to how modern constitutional monarchies function generally. The actual transfer of power rarely happens in the dramatic, cinematic way film and television suggest. It happens through paperwork, through organic laws passed by Parliament, through documents entering into force at technically specified moments that often have nothing to do with pageantry at all. The pageantry comes afterward, carefully staged, broadcast, and photographed, not because it changes anything legally, but because a nation needs a visible, shared moment to process a change that, legally speaking, already happened quietly the night before. For Leonor specifically, that gap between the invisible legal shift and the visible public ceremony has effectively defined her entire life since. She didn't choose the night everything changed. She was asleep for it. But she has spent every year since living inside its consequences, from her military training across 3 academies, to her constitutional oath at 18, to the ever-expanding public duties she now carries alongside her father and sister. The crown didn't arrive with fanfare for her. It arrived as a sentence in a government gazette, and everything since has been the long, public process of growing into what that sentence actually meant. If breaking down the real mechanics behind these defining royal moments, not just the ceremony but what actually happened underneath it, is valuable to you, subscribing helps this channel keep producing exactly this kind of coverage. It's free, it takes 2 seconds, and it means you'll catch the next one. So the next time you see a photograph of Leonor on that Madrid balcony in 2014, 8 years old, waving to a crowd she couldn't possibly understand the significance of yet, remember what had already happened hours earlier while she slept. A signature. A publication in a government gazette. A single midnight moment that quietly rewrote the next several decades of her life, long before the cameras ever started rolling. That's the real story behind the night everything changed, quieter, stranger, and far more human than the ceremony that followed it ever let on. Transparency note. This script distinguishes verified facts, the June 2, 2014 abdication announcement, the June 18 signing ceremony, the midnight June 19 publication in Spain's official state gazette, the proclamation ceremony and balcony appearance, and Leonore's October 2023 constitutional oath, from editorial interpretation regarding the emotional and symbolic meaning of that transition, which reflects reasonable analysis rather than any personal statement made by Leonore herself or an official statement from the Casa Real.